Below zero, everything's covered in white. Happy holidays, we won't make it out tonight. The heater broke an hour ago, but my wish still came true. I'm happy to be freezing cold with you. Perfect holiday is one with you.
All right, well, thanks for joining us this morning. If you're new here, we're in a series right now called Christmas Pictures. And if you're wondering what a series is, what we like to do is take our messages every week and we group them together under some common idea or a theme, and we call it a series. And so right now we're in the third part of a series called Christmas Pictures, but don't worry, I'll catch you up, all right? So what we're talking about is really like Christmas pictures, okay? And the idea behind a Christmas picture, specifically one Christmas picture, but you know like how every year around December, maybe early or late November rather, but you get all the pictures of your friends and their kids, and you get to see what everyone looks like now. And it's a lot of fun. I love it. I love getting Christmas cards. They're great. They usually have a little greeting at the bottom of maybe their sign. Some people put a little story, like a note in, like, oh, this is what all our kids are doing. And it's a nice thing, right? But usually the picture is just the best presentation of the family in that season of life, which is great, and it's a lot of fun. But sometimes there's a story that the picture doesn't tell. Now, if you were with us, you've seen this picture before. This is my Christmas picture from 2017. It is the last time we actually did a Christmas picture. I'm just not a huge fan of the whole process. I think they're great. I don't like getting dressed up. I don't like the whole, whatever. But this is our family, and we just look so perfect and happy. And you probably look at that and think, man, that family, everything must just be always going well all the time. But there's a story that this picture doesn't tell. It's a story of tears. It's a story of frustration, and it's even a little bit of relational tension. Now, I was thinking, okay, let me change it up a little bit this week. I'll show some of the other versions of the pictures that, it took to get to there. And then I decided, you know what? No, I'll just show you all of them. And so this is my gallery in my phone. November 2017, literally about 400 pictures. Now, here's the sad part. This final product, what we have here, this never even happened. This was photoshopped. It's my daughter and I in one picture, and my wife and my son in another one. We're like, oh, let's put them together, and so we're a bunch of phonies. This moment never happened, but that's kind of Christmas picture culture, right? You put your best foot forward. You want everything to look nice and polished and buttoned up. But often there's a story that the picture doesn't tell. And it's true for the most popular Christmas picture of all time. We're talking about this one with our Christmas characters from the Bible, what we call the nativity scene. You've got your kings over here, the three kings. This is probably Joseph, though I don't know for sure. Then we have baby Jesus in the manger, Mary, the lamb, and the shepherds. And they're in this barn type situation with a star, dead center, perfect, amazing. And that's great, and I think that they're great. Anytime you see that, I think it's awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that the nativity scene is bad or anything. However, what we need to be aware of is that we've really polished it up a little bit. We've really cleaned it up, buttoned it up, and made it look like everything is exactly where it needs to be, even in the way that we sing about it. If you listen to some of the lyrics in the songs, like Away in a Manger, there's a line in that song. It says, the child awakes, the little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. We're talking about a newborn baby. I think he makes a crying, And yet it's just like, no, everything was great. And really that wasn't the situation. There's a story that this buttoned up picture doesn't tell. And the real story is so much more relatable. It's so much more meaningful. It is filled with real life complications, difficulties, and uncertainties. And if we see the Christmas story as a perfect picture where everything fell into place, then we miss so much of what it has to offer us. Like on week 1, I don't have time to go into all the details, but briefly I told you on week 1, when we talked about Mary and this manger where baby Jesus was placed, it wasn't an ancient version of a crib. It was an ancient version of a feeding trough where animals ate. And she put her baby in there because she had to. It wasn't supposed to be the centerpiece of the nativity scene. It was a moment of intense desperation, exhaustion. It was something that brought together, like it was the culmination of the difficulty of the last 9 months, where she was facing things like shame and isolation. She probably had been cut off from so many of the people that she loved. And there, after a 90-mile journey with nothing left in the tank, she places the baby in a manger because there's no one there to hold the baby. And she's shot. And so the question, what Mary's story tells us is if like Mary, like Jesus' mom, if there's a manger in her story, there's something she doesn't want in her story, I bet there's a manger in yours. So the question was, is there a manger in your story? What is it that you're dealing with that you don't want to be there? Like it doesn't feel picture perfect. You definitely don't want it on your Christmas card and you wish it would go away. There's a manger in your story, or there will be, or there has been. And then the following week we talked about Joseph, the man who raised Jesus. He doesn't get too much attention, but Joseph, we talked about how in that ancient culture there, when you were pledged to be married to someone, there was a real sense of pride and duty even to prepare a place for your new family. And Joseph, because of his crazy situation, is not able to do that. He's got to take a 90-mile journey back to his hometown where he doesn't even have a room for his pregnant wife who gives birth in some sort of barn or cave. And then they have to get on the road again several different times. There's a 90-mile journey, there's a 70-mile journey, there's a 100-and-something mile journey. And aside from just the sheer difficulty of pulling that off, all of it was a reminder that he was not providing a place for his family. And yet, as Matthew, who recorded this for us, he constantly points back to these ancient writings that show us that Joseph was exactly where he needed to be, even though every step of the way, it would have been the last place he wanted to be. And so the question last week we asked is, what if the last place you want to be is the exact place you need to be? What if there's something you need to do that you wouldn't be able to do if you weren't where you are? Or something you need to learn that you wouldn't be able to learn if you weren't where you were? What if there's a purpose to the position you're in? So there's so much, we're really just scratching the surface here, but there's so much that this story has to tell us that we miss if we're like, oh, everything's just A-okay. The people that we're looking at this week, for me, these people are honestly, they might be like my favorite people in the Christmas story, at least my favorite part. I mean, Jesus is my favorite person in the Christmas story. But like the most, I think, exciting part of the Christmas story comes from these guys we have learned to call the three kings. The three kings. 3 kings at the birth of Jesus. Now, before we go into their story, I gotta like share something with you. And I don't mean to ruin this, okay? Some of you probably know this already. But unfortunately, what we know from their story is that there were not 3 of them. There were 3 gifts. Gold, frankincense, and all right. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's where we get 3 from. There could have been 2. There could have been 40. We really don't know. All right? Second thing we need to know about the 3 kings at the birth of Jesus. They weren't kings. We call them wise men. The original word is magi, which is the plural form of the word magus. It's where we get our word in English for magic. The magi practiced sorcery. They looked at the sky, the stars, and they tried to read what the stars were telling them. So they weren't kings, but sometimes they were sought out by other kings for advice because they were known to be people who could read things and figure out what was going on in the world. The last thing you need to know is that they were not at the birth of Jesus. They came maybe months or maybe even over a year after Jesus was born. This happened way down the road. Now, again, we can keep them in our nativity scene. It's nice that they're there. They balance out the shepherds on one side, the magi on the other side. Otherwise, it would topple over and the star wouldn't be in the middle. But they weren't actually there, okay? Their story, though, has so much to show us. Here we go. It says this. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, remember that's where Joseph took Mary, in Judea, during the time of King Herod, magi from the east, from out east, they came to Jerusalem and they asked, where is the one who has been born the King of the Jews? They say, we saw his star when it rose and we've come to worship him. Now, right away, Jesus has been born and we meet this person. His name is King Herod. Now, Herod was crazy, but like next level crazy. Herod was known as the king of the Jews, but he wasn't the king of the Jews. Like if you know ancient Jewish history, like David was a king of the Jews, Saul was a king of the Jews, Solomon was a king of the Jews. Well, this was kind of different. You see, the Roman Empire ruled the entire known world at that point, and they put Herod, like they appointed him to be the king of the Jews, almost like an inside guy. He was a puppet king for Caesar so that they knew what was going on the inside. If they wanted to change something with the Jewish people, they could do that. So he wasn't like a real king of the Jews. He was appointed by the Roman Empire. And so if you're one of those guys who thinks a lot about the Roman Empire, now you have something else to think about. If you don't know what that is, it's the thing on TikTok. Anyway, so Herod is appointed by the Roman Empire. Now, here's where it gets like next level crazy, okay? Herod hated the idea of someone else being king so much that he killed his own sons just because he didn't like the idea of someone else taking his spot. Not only that, but he was so afraid that people wouldn't be upset when he died that he put this system in place where the moment news broke of his death, some of the most beloved and respected people in the community would also be killed. Just because he wanted all of Israel to be really sad when he died. Caesar was quoted saying he would rather be one of Herod's pigs than one of his sons, just because of how ruthless this guy was. And so we have King Herod, and the Magi approach him, and they're like, where's the king of the Jews? We're looking for him. We are searching for this king of the Jews. We saw his star and we've come to worship him. They're like, we've been reading the stars, and this was common for them. What people who study this think is that when they noticed a star in the sky that they hadn't seen before, they believe that to represent a new king in a new area. And so they go out in search of this king, this Messiah. Now, this story, it's being recorded by Matthew, or someone, you may know him as Levi. He was actually a follower of Jesus. He took really good notes. And so he wrote down what we know as the Gospel of Matthew. The thing he wants his readers to know is that while all of ancient Israel was waiting for this king to come, waiting for this Messiah, the Christ, this conqueror that was going to come, Matthew's trying to explain that the Magi, like other people, were also waiting. There's also this sense that everyone else is looking for something. The idea he's getting at here is really this idea of the pursuit the pursuit of God. It's this search for meaning. As far back as human civilization goes, we find this all over the place. Like, as human beings, we are constantly looking for a greater sense of meaning, a purpose. It's this ongoing feeling of discontentment that we chase after. And what a lot of people have suggested in like a metaphorical sense is that it's as if there's this void that can only be satisfied by the one who put it there, by God himself. And it's been given different names throughout history. Zen Buddhists refer to this as like a hot coal that burns in your throat, like something you just can't ignore but is looking to be resolved. It's this search for something greater. Tom Brady, I've mentioned this before if you've been here for a while. Tom Brady had an interview a few years back. It was before he went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had already won the Super Bowl. He's been named MVP. Some people have said that he is the greatest quarterback of all time, second only to Eli Manning, of course. And really, though, he's on top of the world. He's married. He was married. He's not anymore, but he had a beautiful wife, like beautiful family. He was at the very top of the mountain. And in this interview, the interviewer's like, Tom, what's next? Like, you did it. You made it. You're there. And he says, I feel like there's just got to be something else. Like, there's got to be more. And so there's this thing that needs to be satisfied within us. And we can call it different things. You know, at different points of life, we probably chase after it in different ways. Like, it's the thing you think you're gonna be good with when you finally obtain it. Like, maybe for you, it's this dream job, you're going after it, you're chasing it, or it's a position, like and you think like, well, once I get that, then I'll be good, right? Or once I find that person, well, then I'll be good. Or once I make this much money, or once I become this successful, it's the once I, then I myth, right? And you know this. If you've ever felt that way and gotten that thing, that feeling didn't go away. And so what happens is, like Matthew's explaining this, like everyone's after this. Everyone is searching in this way. Even these magi, these people you would not expect to be in the story. And then Jesus grows up and he explains it in so many different ways. He's like, you know, that feeling within you, if you want to call it a thirst, I am the water to that thirst. If you call it a hunger, I am the bread to that hunger. If it feels like a sense of weariness that won't go away, I am the rest for your soul. If it's darkness within you, I am light to your darkness. He's not saying I have, he's saying I am what you've been looking for. He doesn't come to offer like a new list of rules, a new category of things you're now doing wrong, but like that deep sense of meaning and purpose. He's like, I can give that to you. And so Matthew's trying to show us, like, all of us are looking for that. And maybe you're looking for that. Maybe that's what brought you here. Like, maybe there's something more. I feel like there's something missing. There's a gap, there's a void, there's a something. And Jesus would say, that's what I am. And so they show up, these people searching show up. They show up looking for an answer. And watch what happens. Watch what happens, okay? It says this. It says, like, when they show up, King Herod hears that, when he hears this, he's disturbed. Why? Because he doesn't like the idea of anyone being called the king of the Jews except for him. It says he's disturbed and all Jerusalem with him, probably because they're magi that are looking and not respected Jewish teachers. And so it says, when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. Herod's like, I don't know where this Messiah is supposed to be born. Let me, go get the people that study this stuff. And so he gets the religious elite, the people with all the answers in the religious community. The people at the top of their organized religion. He asks them and they give him an answer. They say, oh, we know that one. We memorized that Bible verse. In Bethlehem, in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. And then they quote their Bible, we call the Old Testament. It says, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. They're like, yeah, we know that answer. It's Bethlehem. If someone's looking, tell them to go to Bethlehem. Now, what's really interesting is that, they don't go with him. They don't follow the Magi. They're not interested in what's happening in Bethlehem. They just know the answer. And so Matthew continues with the next verse, and he says, so Herod called the Magi secretly, and he found out from them the exact time this star, whatever it was, had appeared. And it says he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go and worship him. Now, he's full of baloney. He's got no interest in worshiping him. We find out later he wants to kill the baby because he doesn't like anyone else being known as the king of the Jews. But here's what we can't miss from the story. These people who are searching for a spiritual answer go to the top of their organized religion. The people who know all the answers and represent the essence of religious community, and they're let down. They find that these people are able to explain something they're not looking to experience themselves. You can't miss this. In the first documented account of somebody looking for Jesus and turning to some form of organized religion, they're not interested in leading them to Jesus. And they're let down. Now, let me say this, all right? I am a fan of organized religion. When I honestly believe when the church is healthy, there is nothing greater in the world. But if you spend 5 minutes learning about church history, or even just 5 minutes learning about the history of some of the people in this room, you will hear that a lot of harm has been done in the name of organized religion. A lot of pain has been caused. And so the reminder here, the thing we can't miss in the Magi's story is that, the message about Jesus is infinitely better than the messengers, always. And so we put our faith in him. We are searching for him and what he has to offer, not what someone who represents him has to offer. If you go here to this church long enough, we will disappoint you. If you get to know me, at some point, I will disappoint you. Not because I want to, but because I'm not Jesus. And this church is an imperfect organization filled with imperfect people. And we believe in it and we try to get it right, but we are going to screw up. And from the start, you've got to know that that's where your faith has got to be, in him, not in an organization that represents him. And so they go looking, and they find the religious leaders are not interested in following them, not even stationing someone in Bethlehem. If they knew that the Messiah was coming to Bethlehem, you'd think they'd just station someone there, just always check in with Bethlehem, see if any crazy things are happening. But they don't. So it says this. It says, after they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them. It's this idea that the star moved for the first time. It went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. It says, when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. It leads them to Jesus. And on coming to the house, you see he's not in a barn or a cave anymore. This is later on, it's down the road. They saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. And they didn't show up. They had learned not to show up someplace empty-handed, so they brought some gifts. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. You see, the amazing thing about this story, and what is totally mind-blowing, and it's so hard for us to grasp this because we're not in their culture like they were, to look at the stars for answers in ancient Jewish culture was absolutely forbidden. The punishment for that was severe. It was considered like forbidden sorcery. And so to say that God himself was like, all right, if these people aren't gonna help you, well then you're looking at the stars, I can work with the stars. And so for Matthew to write that God used this star to lead them to Jesus, if you were reading this in the ancient world, you were to think this book was stolen and someone vandalized it. Because it is so out there. In other words, the idea here, what Matthew wants his readers to know, and what we need to learn from the story of the Magi, is that if you, like these guys, pursue God only to find that he has been in pursuit of them. The story here is so much more about God's pursuit of us than it is about our pursuit of God. It's this idea that God is willing to do anything and everything to get our attention. This is the story of what we call the gospel, the whole idea of Jesus growing up and giving his life for us. It's as if he's saying, like, this is how far I will go to show you I love you, to show you that I'm in your corner, to show you that I am deeply invested in your well-being, because he's in pursuit of us. The story of the Magi shows us that God is trying to get your attention. And it may not be in a way that you expect it to be. But if you step back and look at how this story ends, who gets to see Jesus? It wasn't the religious people that knew all the answers and memorized the Bible verses. It was the people, the outsiders, the ones that the religious community would have pushed away, that are like, we want to know. And so they search and they find. The answer here is that God shows himself to people who are looking. He speaks to people who are listening in ways that you may not expect, at times that you may not expect, but he is in pursuit of you. He's trying to get your attention. It's like this idea that we're like running away in this direction, and the moment you stop to turn around, you find he's been chasing after you the entire time. He is pursuing us so much more than we could ever possibly pursue him. And in this story, it's in ways that makes people uncomfortable. So my question for you, and what I genuinely believe, I believe there's a star in your story. There's probably a bunch of them. I believe God's trying to get your attention. He may be trying to lead you to him for the first time. Like he may be trying to show you that he could be trusted, that he's worth following. Or maybe you've been following him for a long time and there's something you need to know or something you need to learn, and he's trying to get your attention. This story, you got the religious people who've got the writings, and God's like, hello, 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 and they're not looking and they don't care. And you got these other people that don't have as much knowledge, but they're looking for something, and they're the ones that hear from him. Where do you find yourself at this point in your life? Are you looking? Like, maybe there's a God, and maybe he's trying to get my attention. Maybe there's something I need to learn. And maybe he's trying to get my attention in a way that I did not expect, that I am not expecting. Maybe there's a person in your family that's making you feel a certain way that you don't normally feel. Maybe God's trying to show you something there. Maybe church is a totally new thing for you. And you're like, I don't know, I didn't think I was going to be here, but maybe. I never thought I'd be a church person. Maybe God's trying to show you something. Maybe there's something unfortunate. Maybe it's like a manger in your story. Maybe God's trying to show you something there in that he's trying to get your attention. And the question is always, are you willing to listen? Could be in big ways. It could be in small ways. But he is in pursuit of you. Not because he's trying to get you into some club. Not because there are some rules that he wants you to obey. But because he cares deeply for you and he knows that he is the bread to that deep hunger you've been living with your entire life. There's a star in your story. I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. We're just about done. But I'll give you a little example, all right? Sometimes these stars, sometimes they're big stars, sometimes they're life-changing stars, sometimes they're stars that send you to, or cause you to develop your faith for the first time. And then other times, they're little things that God is using to try and get your attention, to teach you something, or to show you something about him or about yourself. You know, just last week, I was playing basketball with some guys that I play with pretty often. And there came a point in the game where the guy that I was guarding, it was early, he got past me, and he scored, and I was just kind of dragging my feet and whatever. And one of the guys on my team turns around, we're just playing pickup, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. He turns around, he looks at me, he gets right in my face, and he like claps his hands, he goes, "Let's go, play defense." And I looked at him, and I just said, I had lots of thoughts, but I just said nothing. I said nothing. And I'm like, all right, you know, whatever, we're just playing. And I'm trying to let it roll off, but it's just not. It bothered me more than I wanted to. Now, no one's going to hear that and like it, right? But I'm just trying to like let it go. And it stuck with me. And so eventually, you know, I didn't want anything to get between us. I went up to him afterwards. I was like, "Hey, thanks for keeping me accountable." He's like, "No problem, you were being lazy." And we're great friends. I love the guy. He's fantastic, okay? But my point is, really, I've been thinking about that moment since it happened 2 weeks ago. Like, what is it within me that couldn't let that go? Like, why couldn't I handle that? Why couldn't I had every reason to say, okay, it was a moment of frustration. He's playing hard. I'm not. That's frustrating. You let me know. But why, what caused me to be offended by it to the point that I couldn't just laugh it off? Like, maybe God is trying to show me something that needs to be resolved within me. Like an issue, an internal thing that needs to be dealt with. Often, these stars, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Not because God wants you to be a certain way, but because he cares for you and he knows. He knows, like a good father cares for his children. He knows there's a better way to live. There's a better way to do things. And so this year, what are the stars in your story? Are you willing to follow them when they appear?